The sun had already stolen every drop of mercy from the sky by the time Adelaide Barrett's knees buckled beside the old stone well, her fingers scraping uselessly against the rough surface as consciousness began slipping away like sand through desperate hands. The journey from Carson City had been a fool's errand from the start, but Adelaide had been raised to honor family obligations, even when they felt more like shackles. Her aunt's letter had arrived 3 weeks prior, begging her to come help with the mercantile in Silver Peak, Nevada, promising room and board and a fresh start away from the suffocating sympathy that had followed Adelaide since her parents' deaths 2 years ago. At 22, she had thought herself prepared for the harsh realities of Nevada territory in the summer of 1878. But preparation meant nothing when your horse threw a shoe 15 miles outside of town and bolted, leaving you with nothing but a nearly empty canteen and foolish determination. Adelaide had walked for hours under that merciless August sun, her dark traveling dress absorbing heat until she felt like she was being cooked alive inside her own clothes. The well had appeared like a mirage at first, sitting beside an abandoned homestead with walls half collapsed and a roof caving inward. She had stumbled toward it with the last of her strength, knowing that water meant survival, that she just needed to rest and drink, and then she could make it the remaining miles to Silver Peak. But when she reached the well and peered down into its depths, her heart had sunk. The rope was there, and she could see the glint of water far below, but her arms had no strength left to pull the bucket up. She had tried once, twice, 3 times, her muscles trembling with exhaustion and dehydration, and then the world had started spinning, and she found herself on the ground, with no memory of falling. The earth beneath her cheek was hot and gritty, and Adelaide knew with a strange detached clarity that this was a terrible way to die. Not in some grand fashion, not surrounded by loved ones, but alone beside a well full of water she could not reach. Her lips cracked when she tried to swallow. Her vision dimmed at the edges. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was nearly upon her. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, Adelaide became aware of movement, of a presence that blocked out the sun for one blessed moment. She tried to lift her head, but managed only the smallest movement. Jesus Christ! The voice was male, rough with surprise and concern. Madam, madam, can you hear me? Adelaide wanted to answer, but her tongue felt swollen in her mouth. She made a sound that might have been affirmative. She felt hands on her then, strong and careful, rolling her gently onto her back. The face that swam into view above her was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out dark eyes filled with worry and a sun-weathered face that suggested a man who spent his life outdoors. "You are burning up," he said, and his voice carried the slow drawl of someone who had spent time in Texas before finding his way north. "When did you last drink?" Adelaide tried to form words. "Horse," she managed to croak. "Gone." "All right, just hold on now." The man moved with swift efficiency, and Adelaide heard the creak of the well's pulley, the splash of the bucket hitting water far below. He was pulling the rope, hand over hand, and she could hear the strain in his breathing as he hauled the heavy bucket up from the depths. Then he was kneeling beside her again, one arm sliding beneath her shoulders to lift her into a half-sitting position against his chest. The movement made her head spin worse, but then there was a tin cup pressed to her lips and water, blessed water, cool and clean. "Slow now," he instructed, his voice gentle despite its roughness. "Just small sips or you will be sick." Adelaide wanted to gulp it down, to drink until her shrunken stomach could hold no more, but he controlled the flow, patient and steady, letting her have just enough before pulling it back. They repeated this several times, and with each small drink, Adelaide felt her awareness sharpening, the fog of dehydration beginning to lift. "That is better," the man said, and Adelaide could hear the relief in his voice. "Your color's coming back." She managed to focus on his face properly now. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features marked by sun and wind. His dark hair needed cutting and curled slightly where it touched his collar. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his shirt dusty from travel, and his vest worn but well made. There was something solid about him, something that spoke of dependability. "Thank you," Adelaide whispered, her voice still rough but functional now. "I thought I was going to die." "You might have, if I had not been passing through." He gave her more water, and this time she was able to hold the cup herself, though her hands shook. "What in God's name are you doing out here alone?" "My horse bolted. I was trying to reach Silver Peak." The cowboy shook his head in disbelief. "You walked from where your horse threw you? In this heat?" "I did not have much choice." Adelaide managed something that might have been a smile. Staying in the desert seemed worse. "Fair enough." He stood and retrieved his own canteen from his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently nearby. "But you are lucky I was checking on this old place. My family used to own this land before we sold it 5 years back. I come by sometimes to make sure no one has moved in and claimed it." Adelaide took another careful sip of water. Now that she was not dying, embarrassment was creeping in. She must look absolutely wretched, her dress filthy and sweat-stained, her carefully pinned hair half-fallen and tangled with dust. "I am Adelaide Barrett. I apologize for the dramatic introduction." "Austin Lawson," he replied, and there was a hint of amusement in his dark eyes now that the immediate crisis had passed. "And no apology needed. Dessert does not care about drama or dignity. It just takes what it wants if you are not careful." He helped her move into the shade of the collapsed homestead's remaining wall, and Adelaide felt her strength slowly returning with each passing minute and each small drink of water. Austin brought his horse over and retrieved a piece of dried beef from his saddlebag, which he insisted she eat, despite her protests that she could not possibly impose further. "You need food as much as water," he said firmly, "and I have more back at the ranch. Eat." Adelaide ate, and it was the best dried beef she had ever tasted simply because she was alive to taste it. As the immediate emergency faded, she found herself studying Austin more carefully. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, checking her condition with a surprisingly gentle touch, making sure she stayed in the shade and did not drink too quickly. "You work on a ranch?" she asked between small bites. "Own one, actually." "Well, part of one." Austin settled back against the wall beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to help if needed. "My brother Andrew and I inherited it from our father 3 years ago. The Lazy L, about 10 miles east of Silver Peak." "I am supposed to be staying in Silver Peak," Adelaide explained, "with my aunt who runs the mercantile. Martha Barrett." Austin's face lit with recognition. "Miss Martha? She is your aunt. She has been talking about you coming for weeks now. Half the town knows Adelaide Barrett is coming to help at the store." Despite everything, Adelaide felt herself blushing. That sounds like Aunt Martha. She never could keep anything to herself. "She is going to be worried sick when you do not arrive on time." Austin glanced at the sun, calculating time by its position in a way that spoke of years of practice. "It is going on 4 in the afternoon now. Were you expected today?" "By evening, yes." "Then we had better get you there." Austin stood and offered his hand. "Think you can ride?" "It is 10 miles to my ranch and another 5 into town from there, but we can make it before full dark if we move steady." Adelaide accepted his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs felt wobbly but functional. "I can ride, though I am afraid I do not have much choice regardless. You could ride up behind me, or I could walk and you could take the saddle proper." Austin was already leading his horse over. "Your choice." The thought of making him walk was mortifying, but Adelaide was not certain she had the strength to maintain balance, riding behind someone else. Austin must have read her indecision because he made the choice for her, mounting up smoothly and then extending his hand down to her. "Come on," he said. "You can sit behind and hold on. Ranger here is steady as they come." Adelaide took his hand and let him pull her up behind him, grateful for the strength in his arm that made the maneuver possible. She settled herself on the horse's rump, acutely aware that propriety demanded she not hold on to Austin too tightly, but survival instinct won out over propriety. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held on. "You good?" Austin asked over his shoulder. "Yes, thank you again, Mr. Lawson. Just Austin is fine." He nudged the horse into a steady walk. "And you are welcome, Adelaide, though I think maybe you should thank the Lord more than me. I almost did not come out here today." As they rode, Adelaide found herself relaxing into the gentle rhythm of the horse's movement. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, and though the heat remained oppressive, it had lost its killing edge. She could feel the solid warmth of Austin's back against her cheek, where she rested her head, too tired to maintain perfect posture, and he did not seem to mind. They talked as they traveled, Austin asking polite questions about her journey and her plans in Silver Peak, Adelaide answering and asking her own questions in return. She learned that he had been working cattle since he was old enough to sit a horse, that his brother Andrew was married with a baby daughter, that their ranch ran about 300 head of cattle and another 50 horses. Austin handled the daily operations, while Andrew managed the business side of things, a partnership that suited them both. "Sounds like you and your brother work well together," Adelaide observed. "Most days." Austin's voice carried a smile she could not see. "He thinks I am too reckless, and I think he is too cautious, but we balance each other out. Our father taught us that family sticks together no matter what." Adelaide felt a pang of loss for her own parents, gone too soon in an influenza outbreak that had swept through Carson City 2 winters ago. That is a good lesson. It is the only one that matters in the end. Austin fell quiet for a moment, then added, "I am sorry if that sounded presumptuous. I do not know your situation." "No, you are right." Adelaide tightened her arms slightly around his waist without thinking. "Family is everything. That is why I am here, really. Aunt Martha is the only family I have left, and she needed help." They rode in companionable silence after that, the desert slowly giving way to scrubland, and then to the first signs of civilization as they approached the Lawson Ranch. Adelaide saw cattle grazing in the distance, and then buildings began to appear. A barn and several outbuildings, and finally a ranch house that was modest but well maintained. A man emerged from the barn as they rode up, and Adelaide could see the family resemblance immediately. He was slightly taller than Austin and a bit broader through the shoulders, with the same dark hair and weathered features. "Austin, you are back sooner than I expected." Then Andrew Lawson noticed Adelaide and his eyebrows shot up. "Who is this?" "Adelaide Barrett, Miss Martha's niece," Austin explained as he dismounted and then turned to help Adelaide down. "Found her collapsed by the old homestead well. Her horse bolted somewhere past Hawthorne." "Good Lord." Andrew's expression shifted to concern. "Are you all right, Miss Barrett?" "I am now, thanks to your brother." Adelaide accepted Austin's steadying hand as her feet touched solid ground. Her legs protested, but held. "He quite literally saved my life." Austin has a habit of being in the right place at unexpected times. Andrew smiled, and Adelaide could see genuine affection for his brother beneath the teasing tone. "Come inside and rest properly. My wife Sarah will want to meet you, and my daughter will certainly want to stare at a new face." The inside of the ranch house was cooler than outside, and Adelaide was introduced to Sarah Lawson, a petite woman with kind eyes and capable hands who immediately insisted on drawing Adelaide a bath and lending her a clean dress. Their daughter Emma was 8 months old, all curious eyes and grabbing hands, and Adelaide found herself smiling genuinely for the first time since her ordeal. After a proper wash and a simple meal of beef stew that tasted like heaven, Adelaide felt almost human again. She sat in the Lawsons' parlor, wearing one of Sarah's dresses, her own clothes soaking in a washtub, and listened as Austin explained to his family how he had found her. "You are incredibly fortunate," Sarah said, bouncing Emma on her knee. "People die in the desert every summer, Just last month, a prospector was found 3 days dead near Carson Wells. I am very aware of my fortune. Adelaide looked at Austin, who was leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed. I owe you a debt I am not sure I can repay. You do not owe me anything, Austin said firmly. Any decent person would have done the same. Maybe, but you were the one who was actually there. Adelaide held his gaze, seeing something in his dark eyes that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with heat or dehydration. Andrew cleared his throat meaningfully, and Austin looked away first, a faint color rising in his cheeks that Adelaide found charming. I will ride you into town first thing tomorrow morning, Austin said, addressing the wall somewhere above Adelaide's head. Give you time to rest properly tonight and let your aunt know you are safe. I can send a message tonight so she does not worry. That would be wonderful, thank you. Adelaide felt exhaustion creeping over her now that she was safe and fed. Though I feel terrible imposing on your family's hospitality. Nonsense, Sarah said warmly. We have a spare room and you are welcome to it. Besides, Martha Barrett has been kind to us since we moved here. The least we can do is make sure her niece arrives safely. Adelaide accepted gratefully, and soon found herself tucked into a comfortable bed in a small room that smelled faintly of lavender. Through the window, she could see stars emerging in the darkening sky, impossibly bright without city lights to dim them. She thought about how close she had come to never seeing another sunset, and sent up a prayer of genuine thanksgiving that Austin Lawson had decided to check on an abandoned homestead on this particular afternoon. Sleep claimed her quickly, deep and dreamless. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and frying bacon, and Adelaide woke feeling stiff and sore, but fundamentally recovered. Sarah had dried and brushed her dress as best she could, though it still showed the signs of yesterday's ordeal. Adelaide dressed and joined the family for breakfast, struck by the easy warmth between them, the way Andrew and Sarah communicated in glances and small touches, the way Austin played with baby Emma and made her giggle. Ready to finally reach Silver Peak? Austin asked as Adelaide finished her second cup of coffee. As ready as I will ever be. Adelaide smiled. Though after yesterday, 5 miles on a horse seems like nothing. They set out mid-morning, Austin on Ranger, and Adelaide on a gentle mare named Daisy, that Sarah assured her was impossible to spook. The ride into town was pleasant, the morning still relatively cool and the landscape pretty in its stark way. Austin pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area, and Adelaide found herself laughing more than once at his dry humor and vivid descriptions. Silver Peak itself was a typical Nevada mining town, smaller than Carson City, but bustling with activity. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with false-fronted buildings that promised everything from supplies to entertainment. Austin led her directly to the Mercantile, a well-kept building with a painted sign that read Barrett's General Store. The moment they dismounted, the door burst open, and a woman in her 50s rushed out, her face a mixture of relief and fury. Adelaide Marie Barrett, I have been worried half to death. Aunt Martha swept Adelaide into a fierce hug. When you did not arrive yesterday, I was certain something terrible had happened, and then young Timothy Lawson brought a message last night that you were safe. But that just made me more anxious because what does safe but late mean? It means I had a bit of trouble with my horse, but Austin here found me and made sure I got here in one piece. Adelaide returned the hug, feeling tears prick her eyes at this evidence of being cared for. Martha released her and turned to Austin with a look of profound gratitude. Austin Lawson, I do not know what you did, but thank you for bringing my niece to me safely. He saved my life, Aunt Martha. Adelaide's voice was quiet but firm. Quite literally, I would have died of thirst if he had not found me. Martha's face went pale, and she looked at Austin with new eyes. Then I owe you more than I can say. You do not owe me anything, Miss Martha. Austin shifted uncomfortably under the weight of their gratitude, clearly not a man who enjoyed being the center of attention. I was glad to help. He tipped his hat to both women and turned to mount his horse, but Adelaide stepped forward impulsively and caught his hand. Austin, wait! She felt herself blushing, but pressed on. Could you come by the store sometime? I would like to properly thank you once I am settled. Austin looked down at their joined hands, and then back up at her face, something warm and hopeful sparking in his dark eyes. I could do that. We come into town for supplies every couple weeks anyway. Then I will see you soon. Adelaide squeezed his hand once before releasing it, very aware of her aunt's interested gaze. After Austin rode away, Martha ushered Adelaide inside the store and up the stairs to the living quarters above. The moment they were alone, Martha fixed her with a penetrating look. That boy pulled you back from death's door, did he? He did. Adelaide sank into a chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the last 24 hours. I was completely out of strength beside a well I could not draw from. If he had not come along exactly when he did, I would have died there. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Martha began making tea with the brisk efficiency of a woman who solved problems with action. The Lawson boys are good men. Their father Jack was one of the finest people I ever knew, and he raised his sons right before that horse accident took him. Austin mentioned inheriting the ranch with his brother. 3 years ago now, Jack Lawson was checking fence line when his horse stepped in a gopher hole and went down. Jack broke his neck in the fall, died instantly. Martha shook her head sadly. Andrew had just gotten married, and Austin was only 23. But those boys stepped up and kept the ranch running without missing a beat. They have done Jack proud. Adelaide absorbed this information, understanding Austin a bit better now. He had lost his father, just as she had lost her parents, knew the same grief and responsibility that came with unexpected loss. Over the following days, Adelaide settled into life in Silver Peak. The mercantile was busier than she had expected, serving not just the town, but the surrounding ranches and mining operations. Martha taught her the inventory system and how to handle accounts, introduced her to the regular customers, and slowly began trusting her with more responsibility. Adelaide took to the work easily, enjoying the constant stream of people and the rhythm of commerce. She learned who could be trusted to pay their accounts on time and who needed gentle reminding, which miners preferred tobacco and which preferred whiskey, which ranch wives had children needing fabric for school clothes. 2 weeks after her arrival, Austin Lawson walked through the door of Barrett's General Store. Adelaide was helping Mrs. Chen select thread when she looked up and saw him, and her heart did something complicated in her chest. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, wearing a fresh shirt and with his hair neatly trimmed, though his face still bore the permanent tan of someone who worked outdoors. "Mr. Lawson," Adelaide greeted him with a smile. "What can I help you with today?" "Need to pick up an order Andrew placed last week," Austin replied, his own smile making him look younger. "And some fence staples if you have them." "We do. Let me finish with Mrs. Chen and I will pull your order." Adelaide completed Mrs. Chen's transaction and then retrieved the supplies Andrew had ordered, along with 2 boxes of staples. As she tallied the account, she was acutely aware of Austin watching her, and it made her hands slightly unsteady. "How are you settling in?" Austin asked. "Very well. Aunt Martha is an excellent teacher and the work is satisfying." Adelaide finished the tally and turned the book so Austin could check it. "And I have not collapsed beside any more wells, so I would say I am improving." Austin laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made something flutter in Adelaide's stomach. "Glad to hear it. Would be a shame to make a habit of that." They stood smiling at each other for a moment too long, and then Martha appeared from the storeroom, carrying a bolt of calico. "Austin Lawson, good to see you," Martha said, with entirely too much innocence in her voice. "Will you be staying in town long?" "Just picking up supplies and heading back," Austin replied, "though I might stop by the saloon for a drink before the ride home." "Well, do not let us keep you." Martha set down the calico and fixed Austin with a meaningful look. "Though you are welcome to visit any time. We appreciate good customers." Adelaide wanted to die of embarrassment at her aunt's complete lack of subtlety, but Austin just grinned and tipped his hat. "I will keep that in mind, Miss Martha." After he left, Adelaide turned to her aunt with exasperation. Could you possibly be more obvious? I could try, but I do not see the point in being subtle. Martha picked up the calico again. That boy risked nothing to save your life, Adelaide. He is clearly taken with you, and unless I miss my guess, you feel the same. Why dance around it? Because I have been in town for 2 weeks. Adelaide felt her face burning. I barely know him. You know he is brave and kind and responsible. You know he runs a successful ranch with his brother and honors his father's memory. You know he saved your life without expecting anything in return. Martha began measuring the calico against the yardstick. What else do you need to know before admitting you are interested? Adelaide opened her mouth to argue, and then closed it again, because her aunt was not wrong. She was interested in Austin Lawson, had been since the moment she woke to find him drawing water from that well, but interest felt dangerous, felt like opening herself to loss again when she had barely recovered from losing her parents. I am scared, she admitted quietly. Martha set down the calico and came around the counter to take Adelaide's hands in hers. I know, sweetheart. Losing your parents was terrible, and grief makes us want to protect ourselves. But you cannot live your whole life afraid of loss. Sometimes you have to take a chance on happiness. Over the next month, Austin found reasons to come into town with increasing frequency. Sometimes it was legitimate ranch business. Sometimes it was items Andrew needed, and sometimes it was increasingly transparent excuses that made Martha grin and Adelaide blush. Each visit lasted a bit longer than necessary, the conversation ranging from practical matters to personal stories. And slowly Adelaide felt her walls coming down. She learned that Austin loved his work, but sometimes dreamed of seeing the ocean. That he could play the harmonica, but only knew 3 songs. That he hated lima beans with an irrational passion and would pick them out of stew when Sarah was not looking. That he had been courting a girl in Carson Wells 2 years ago, but she had chosen a merchant over a cowboy, and the rejection had stung more than he wanted to admit. Adelaide shared her own stories in return. Her childhood in Carson City, daughter of a school teacher and a clerk. Her love of reading that her mother had encouraged and her father had supported by bringing home books from the lending library. The suffocating sympathy after her parents died, well-meaning but constant, until she felt like she was drowning in other people's pity. Her relief at Aunt Martha's letter, offering escape and purpose. One Saturday in October, Austin asked if Adelaide would like to see the ranch properly. Sarah keeps saying I should invite you to Sunday dinner, he explained, leaning against the mercantile counter. And I thought maybe you would like to see the place in daylight when you are not half dead from heat exhaustion. Adelaide laughed. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? Martha insisted this was a wonderful idea and that Adelaide should take both Saturday afternoon and Sunday off, waving away Adelaide's protests about leaving her alone with the store. I managed this place for 20 years before you arrived, girl. I think I can handle 1.5 days on my own. So Adelaide found herself riding out to the Lazy L on Saturday afternoon, seated properly on Daisy, who Martha revealed had been stabled behind the mercantile this whole time. The October air was finally cooling from the summer's oppressive heat, and the ride was lovely, Austin pointing out changes in the land that spoke of approaching autumn. The ranch looked different in the afternoon light, more lived in and welcoming. Andrew and Sarah greeted her warmly, and Emma had grown in the month since Adelaide had last seen her, now pulling herself up on furniture and investigating everything within reach. Austin showed Adelaide around the property, the barn where they kept the horses during winter, the stable for working stock, the chicken coop that Sarah tended, the workshop where Andrew did leather work in his spare time. He introduced her to some of the cattle, pointing out the breeding stock he was most proud of, explaining bloodlines and characteristics with the enthusiasm of someone who truly loved his work. You have built something good here, Adelaide said as they walked back toward the house, the sun beginning its descent toward the western mountains. Andrew and I have tried to honor what our father started. Austin stopped and looked out over the land, his expression thoughtful. This place is our legacy, and someday we will pass it to our children, and they will pass it to theirs. There is something satisfying about that, about being part of something bigger than yourself. That sounds lonely, though, Adelaide said softly. Legacy is important, but so is having someone to share it with. Austin turned to look at her, something intense in his dark eyes. Is that what you want? Someone to share things with? Adelaide's breath caught. They were standing close enough that she could see the faint scar on his chin, the exact shade of brown in his eyes, the way his hands flexed at his sides like he was restraining himself from reaching for her. Yes, she whispered. I do. Adelaide. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I have been trying to court you properly, taking it slow because I did not want to presume or push, but I need you to know that I have been half in love with you since I pulled you up from beside that well. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Only half? Austin smiled, tentative and hopeful. I did not want to sound completely mad, but if we are being honest, it might be more than half. Adelaide reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I think I have been falling for you too. It terrifies me because I have lost so much already, but Martha is right that I cannot live my whole life afraid. I am afraid too, Austin admitted. Loving someone means they can hurt you, can leave you. My father's death taught me that nothing is guaranteed, but I would rather have whatever time we get together than waste years being cautious. Then let us not waste any more time. Adelaide squeezed his hand. I care for you, Austin Lawson. I want to see where this goes. Austin lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so gentle and reverent that Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. I will court you properly, he promised. Do this right. You deserve that. Dinner that evening was a warm family affair. Andrew and Sarah clearly delighted by the development they had been expecting. After the meal, Austin pulled out his harmonica and played his 3 songs while Sarah sang, her voice clear and pretty in the lamplight. Adelaide held Emma and felt something settle in her chest, a sense of belonging she had not experienced since before her parents died. She spent the night in the same guest room as before, and in the morning attended church with the Lawsons in Silver Peak. Aunt Martha's expression when they all walked in together was smug enough to make Adelaide want to sink through the floor, but the service was lovely, and afterwards the whole town seemed to know that Adelaide Barrett and Austin Lawson were courting. The following months passed in a blur of happiness Adelaide had not anticipated. Austin came to town twice a week, once for legitimate supplies and once purely to see Adelaide. They took walks together when the weather permitted, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to shoot, patient as she learned to handle a rifle, praising her steady aim. She read to him from her favorite books, and he listened with genuine interest, even when the stories were romantic nonsense. In December, Andrew and Sarah hosted a Christmas gathering and invited half the territory. The ranch house was packed with neighbors and friends, and Adelaide helped Sarah manage the chaos, feeling useful and included. Austin stayed close to her side throughout the evening, and when midnight came and someone started singing carols, he pulled her into a quiet corner and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and searching, his lips warm against hers, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. Adelaide kissed him back, pouring all her feelings into it, and when they finally broke apart, she was breathless and dizzy in the best possible way. "Merry Christmas, Adelaide," Austin murmured against her forehead. "Merry Christmas," she whispered back. In January, a hard winter storm struck the territory, dumping snow that trapped Adelaide and Martha in town and the Lawsons at their ranch for nearly a week. When the roads finally cleared, Austin rode into town and swept Adelaide into his arms, not caring who saw. "I was worried," he admitted. "The storm was worse than expected, and I kept thinking about you stuck in town. We were fine. The store is well built, and we had plenty of supplies." Adelaide hugged him tightly. "But I missed you. I missed you too." Austin pulled back just enough to look at her. "Adelaide, I know we have only been courting since October, but I need to ask you something important. Her heart started pounding. What is it? Will you marry me? The words came out in a rush. I know it is fast, and if you need more time, I will wait as long as you need. But I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. And every day we are apart feels like a waste. Joy burst through Adelaide's chest like sunlight. Yes, yes, of course I will marry you. Austin kissed her right there in the middle of the mercantile, and Martha actually cheered from behind the counter where she had been pretending not to eavesdrop. They were married in April of 1879 in the same Silver Peak church where Adelaide had attended her first service with the Lawsons. Martha cried through the whole ceremony, and Sarah stood beside Adelaide as her matron of honor, and Andrew stood beside his brother looking proud enough to burst. Adelaide wore a simple white dress that Martha had sewn for her, and Austin wore his best suit. And when they exchanged vows, Adelaide felt like her heart might explode from happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, and it seemed like everyone in the territory came to celebrate. There was music and dancing and more food than seemed possible, and Adelaide danced with Austin until her feet hurt, and she did not care because she was married to the man who had saved her life and won her heart. Their wedding night was spent in the guest room that had become Adelaide's room during visits, though Austin carried her over the threshold like it was a grand palace instead of a simple ranch house bedroom. He was gentle and patient, having waited for their wedding night despite the temptation of those months of courtship, and Adelaide fell asleep in his arms, feeling cherished and complete. The following morning, reality arrived in the form of practical discussions about where they would live. The ranch house was big enough to accommodate another couple, but Adelaide and Austin both craved independence. After much discussion, they decided to build a small cabin on the western edge of the Lawson property, close enough to help with the ranch, but far enough to have privacy. Construction began in May, with Andrew and Austin doing most of the work themselves, though several neighbors helped with the heavy lifting. Adelaide and Sarah managed the ranch work while the men built, and Martha tended the store with Adelaide's help in the mornings and evenings. It was exhausting but satisfying, and by July the cabin was finished. It was simple but well made, 2 rooms and a loft with a good fireplace and windows that caught the morning light. Austin carved their initials into the lintel before carrying Adelaide over the threshold, and she cried happy tears as he set her down in their home. It is perfect, she whispered. You are perfect. Austin kissed her softly. And I am the luckiest man in Nevada territory. They settled into married life with surprising ease, the rhythm of work and rest and companionship feeling natural. Adelaide still helped at the mercantile 3 days a week, which gave her independence and purpose beyond the ranch. Austin worked cattle with Andrew, and the brothers' partnership continued to thrive. They had Sunday dinners together every week, rotating between the big house and the cabin, and Emma learned to call Adelaide Aunt Addie, which made Adelaide's heart melt every time. In September, Adelaide realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but when a third month passed and morning sickness began, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. She told Austin on a Sunday evening after dinner, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby, she said simply. Austin's face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds before landing on pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and then set her down gently like she might break. A baby, he breathed. We are going to have a baby. In April, I think. Right around our anniversary. Austin kissed her with such tenderness that Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks. They told Andrew and Sarah that night, and Martha the next morning, and both households erupted in celebration. Emma was going to have a cousin, Martha was going to be a great-aunt, and the Lawson family was growing. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Adelaide tired more quickly than usual, and certain smells made her violently nauseous. Austin became impossibly protective, hovering over her until Adelaide had to firmly tell him she was pregnant, not made of glass. He eased back slightly, but still insisted on doing any heavy lifting and would not let her near the horses in case they spooked. Winter arrived, and Adelaide's belly grew round and obvious. She stopped helping at the mercantile in February, when the ride became too uncomfortable, and spent her days preparing the cabin for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets. Sarah had saved all of Emma's baby things and passed them along, and the generosity made Adelaide cry, though everything made her cry these days. In late April, on a warm spring morning, exactly 1 week after their first anniversary, Adelaide went into labor. Sarah and Martha attended the birth, while Austin paced outside with Andrew, both men useless in the face of childbirth. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Adelaide was certain she could not continue, but Martha held her hand and Sarah coached her breathing, and after 14 hours of work, Adelaide's son was born. He came into the world screaming his outrage, red-faced and perfect, and when the midwife placed him in Adelaide's arms, she felt love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Austin was allowed in once Adelaide and the baby were cleaned up, and he approached his son with awe written all over his face. "Can I hold him?" he asked nervously. "Of course. He is your son." Adelaide transferred the tiny bundle carefully, and Austin cradled the baby like he was holding the entire world. "He is so small," Austin marveled. "He will grow." Adelaide watched her husband bond with their child, her heart so full it ached. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son's scrunched face and dark hair, Austin smiled. "What about Alexander?" "Alexander Barrett Lawson. Strong name for a strong boy." "Alexander," Adelaide repeated, testing it. "I love it. Alexander Barrett Lawson it is." Little Alex proved to be a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well once Adelaide figured out the process. The cabin felt smaller with a cradle in the corner, but it also felt more like a home, filled with baby sounds and the smell of milk and the constant low-level exhaustion of new parenthood. Austin proved to be an excellent father, patient and gentle with his son, unafraid to change diapers or walk the floor when Alex was fussy. Andrew and Sarah visited constantly. Emma fascinated by the baby cousin she could not quite touch gently, despite everyone's best efforts. Martha came out to the ranch every Sunday with supplies and gossip from town, always bringing Adelaide's favorite foods and taking the baby long enough for Adelaide to nap. The years passed in the way of busy, contented lives. Alex grew from baby to toddler to little boy, sturdy and adventurous with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn streak. In 1882, Adelaide gave birth to their daughter Amelia, who was quieter than her brother, but just as determined. In 1884, another son arrived, Aaron, who seemed to come into the world smiling and never stopped. The cabin grew too small, so they added on 2 bedrooms and expanded the main room. The Lazy L continued to prosper, and Andrew and Sarah had 2 more children, giving Emma siblings and Alex, Amelia, and Aaron a pack of cousins to run wild with. Martha grew older but remained sharp as ever, training Adelaide to eventually take over the mercantile while still maintaining iron control over the account books. In 1887, Austin's old mare, Daisy, the one Adelaide had ridden on her first proper visit to the ranch, died of old age. They buried her on the property, and Austin carved a marker that read, "Daisy, faithful friend." Alex, now 6 years old, cried at the loss of his favorite horse to sit on, and Austin held his son and explained that death was part of life, that loving something meant accepting you would eventually lose it. "But that does not mean loving is not worth it," Austin said, looking at Adelaide over their son's head. "The love is always worth it." Adelaide nodded, understanding that he was talking about more than just a horse. They had both lost people they loved, had both known the pain of grief, but they had chosen to love anyway and built this life together. In 1890, tragedy struck when a drought hit the territory hard. Cattle died, Water sources dried up, and the Lazy L struggled along with every other ranch in the region. Austin and Andrew worked themselves to exhaustion, trying to save their herd, hauling water from the few remaining wells, rationing feed, making impossible choices about which animals to save and which to cull. It was the worst summer since Adelaide had arrived in Silver Peak, and there were nights when she lay awake worrying that they would lose everything. But the family pulled together, everyone working as hard as they could, and when the rains finally came in October, they had managed to keep enough of the herd alive to rebuild. "We will make it," Austin said that first night after the rain, holding Adelaide close. "It will take time, but we will make it." And they did. Slowly, year by year, the ranch recovered. They rebuilt their herd, bought new breeding stock, even expanded their property by purchasing the abandoned homestead where Austin had first found Adelaide beside the well. "Should we tear down the old buildings?" Andrew asked as they surveyed the property. "No." Austin looked at the collapsed house and the stone well still standing after all these years. "This place is important. This is where I found Adelaide. Let it stand as a reminder." So the old homestead remained, a landmark on the Lazy L, and sometimes Austin and Adelaide would ride out there together and sit by the well, remembering. In 1895, Adelaide's daughter Amelia turned 13 and began showing interest in a neighbor boy, which made Austin threaten to lock her in her room until she was 30. Adelaide laughed and reminded him that they had been only a few years older when they met. "That is different," Austin argued. "I was a responsible adult. You were 26. That boy is 15, which is perfectly reasonable for Amelia to notice." "I do not like it." "You do not have to like it. You just have to trust that we raised her well." Austin grumbled, but eventually accepted that his daughter was growing up, though he made a point of glaring at any boy who looked at her for too long. Adelaide found his protectiveness endearing, if slightly ridiculous. In 1898, tragedy struck again when Aunt Martha suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed on her left side. Adelaide moved into town to care for her, bringing Aaron, now 14, to help run the mercantile, while Alex and Amelia managed with Austin and Sarah at the ranch. Martha recovered some function over the following months, but it was clear she would never fully regain her strength. She was 72 and finally ready to admit she could not run the store alone anymore. "I am leaving it to you," she told Adelaide one evening as they sat in the apartment above the mercantile. "In my will, the store goes to you. You have earned it, and you will run it well." "Aunt Martha, do not talk like that." Adelaide took her aunt's good hand. "You are going to be around for years yet." "Maybe, maybe not." Martha squeezed her fingers weakly. "But either way, you should know my wishes. This store has been my life's work, and I want it to continue through you." Adelaide had tears in her eyes. "I will honor it. I promise." Martha lived another 5 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1903 at the age of 77. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire territory, a testament to how many lives she had touched in her decades running the mercantile. Adelaide grieved deeply, but found comfort in the fact that Martha had lived a long, full life and died on her own terms. True to her word, Martha left the mercantile to Adelaide, who now had to balance running the store with ranch life. Alex, now 22 and newly married to a rancher's daughter named Caroline, took over more of the ranch responsibilities from Austin, who was beginning to feel his age at 47. Amelia married in 1904 a good man named Thomas Miller, who ran a freight business between Silver Peak and Carson City. Aaron showed no interest in settling down, preferring to work cattle and play cards with his friends, which drove Adelaide to distraction but seemed to suit him. In 1905, Andrew suffered a riding accident similar to the one that had killed their father. He survived, but his leg was badly broken and never healed properly, leaving him with a permanent limp and chronic pain. Sarah nursed him through the long recovery, and the incident reminded everyone how fragile life could be. "We are getting old," Austin said one evening as they sat on their cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and gold. He was 52 now, his dark hair heavily threaded with silver, his face lined from decades of sun and wind. "We are," Adelaide agreed. She was 49 with her own lines and silver strands, but she still felt young when Austin looked at her with love. "But we are getting old together, which is all I ever wanted." Austin reached over and took her hand, their fingers lacing together automatically after all these years. "Do you ever regret it? Coming to Silver Peak? Nearly dying in the desert?" Adelaide considered the question seriously. If she had not come to Nevada, had not lost her horse and collapsed by that well, her entire life would be different. She might have married someone in Carson City, or remained single or found some other path, but she could not imagine any of those other lives being better than this one. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Every hardship, every loss, every difficult moment led me here. To you, to our family. How could I regret that? I love you, Adelaide Lawson." Austin lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, the same gesture he had made on the day they first acknowledged their feelings. "I have loved you for 27 years, and I will love you until I die." "And I love you," Adelaide replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "My cowboy who drew water from the well and saved my life in every way that matters." They sat together as the sun set completely, and stars began emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars Adelaide had watched from the same porch for more than 2 decades. Inside the cabin, they could hear Aaron moving around, home for dinner before heading out to check on the cattle. From the direction of the main ranch house, carried on the evening breeze, came the sound of children laughing as they played some game before bedtime. Life continued its rhythm, seasons turning, years passing, the cycle of birth and death and everything in between. The Lazy L continued to thrive under the combined management of Andrew, Austin, and Alex, with the next generation already learning the work. The mercantile remained at the heart of Silver Peak's commerce, run by Adelaide with the same fairness and competence Martha had shown. In 1910, Adelaide became a grandmother when Alex and Caroline welcomed a son they named Jackson. Holding her grandson for the first time, Adelaide was transported back to that day in 1880 when she had held Alex, feeling that same fierce protective love. The circle continuing, generation to generation, exactly as Austin had talked about all those years ago. "Your father would be so proud," Adelaide told Alex as she rocked little Jackson. "And so would Aunt Martha." "I hope so." Alex looked young and terrified and happy all at once, the way new fathers always did. "I hope I can be half the father that Dad was to me." "You will be wonderful," Adelaide assured him. "You come from good people, and you have learned well." More grandchildren followed over the years. Amelia had 3 daughters in quick succession, keeping Thomas on his toes, trying to manage a house full of girls. Aaron finally settled down in 1912 at the age of 28, marrying a widow named Patricia, who had a young son from her first marriage. Aaron adopted the boy, and they went on to have 2 more children together, and Adelaide loved watching her youngest son transform into a devoted family man. In 1915, Austin was thrown from his horse while checking fence line on the far edge of the property. Andrew found him an hour later, conscious but injured, his collarbone broken and several ribs cracked. At 62, he did not heal as quickly as he once would have, and the accident scared all of them. "You need to slow down," Adelaide told him firmly as he recovered. "Let Alex and Aaron handle more of the physical work." "I am not an invalid," Austin argued, but there was less heat in it than there might have been. The fall had frightened him too. "No one said you were, but you are 62 years old, and you do not need to prove anything to anyone." Adelaide softened her tone. "Please, Austin. I need you around for a good while longer yet." Austin reached for her hand. "I will slow down. I promise." And he did, gradually transitioning more responsibility to Alex while focusing on the business side of ranching with Andrew. The brothers were in their 60s now, both showing their age but still sharp and capable. They had successfully transitioned the Lazy L to the next generation, ensuring its continued prosperity. In 1918, the influenza pandemic that swept the world reached Nevada. Silver Peak was relatively isolated, which helped, but people still got sick, and some died. Adelaide worked tirelessly at the Mercantile, providing supplies to quarantined families, extending credit to those who could not pay, doing everything she could to help her community survive. Austin, Andrew, and Alex all caught the flu, but recovered after weeks of illness that left them weak and exhausted. Patricia's oldest son, Adelaide's step-grandson, was not so fortunate. He was only 13 when the fever took him, and the funeral was small and sad, everyone masked and distant, unable to comfort each other properly. The pandemic eventually passed, leaving scars on the community, but ultimately sparing most of Silver Peak's population. Adelaide and Austin emerged grateful for their blessings and acutely aware of their mortality. "We should write everything down," Adelaide said one evening in 1920. "Our story, how we met, what we built, so the grandchildren know." "That is a good idea," Austin agreed, "though I am not much of a writer." "Then I will write and you can tell me what to include." So Adelaide began recording their history, starting with that August day in 1878 when she collapsed by the well and Austin drew water and saved her life. She wrote about their courtship and marriage, the building of their cabin, the births of their children. She wrote about droughts and prosperity, loss and joy, the everyday moments that made up a life. Austin would read what she had written and add details she had forgotten or perspectives she had not considered. It became their evening ritual, remembering their life together, capturing it in words so it would not be lost. In 1922, Andrew Lawson died in his sleep at the age of 69. His heart simply stopped beating, and Sarah woke beside a husband who had already passed beyond her reach. The funeral was large and somber, the whole territory mourning a good man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Austin took his brother's death hard, losing not just a sibling but his partner in everything that mattered. He was quiet for weeks afterward, processing grief that Adelaide recognized all too well. "He was the steady one," Austin said one night, staring into the fireplace. "I was always the reckless one, and he balanced me out. I do not know how to be without him." "You honor him by continuing what you built together," Adelaide said gently. "By being there for Sarah and his children, by living the kind of life he would be proud of." "I am trying." Austin looked at her with eyes that held decades of shared history. "And I have you, which makes everything bearable." They held each other and grieved together, and slowly, Austin found his way through the loss, though Adelaide knew he would carry it forever. Sarah lived another 7 years, dying in 1929 at 72, finally reunited with the husband she had mourned. Her funeral was held on a sunny spring day, and Adelaide remembered the young woman who had welcomed her into the Lawson family more than 50 years ago, who had become sister and friend and co-conspirator in raising their children. "Everyone is leaving?" Austin said quietly at the graveside. He was 76 now, his body bent with age, but his mind still sharp. "Soon it will be our turn." "Perhaps." Adelaide took his hand, her own joints aching with arthritis, but her grip still firm. "But not yet. We still have years left, and grandchildren to spoil, and stories to finish writing." "Always the optimist," Austin said with a smile. "Someone has to be," Adelaide replied. In 1930, Silver Peak celebrated its 60th anniversary as an incorporated town, and Adelaide and Austin were honored as two of the oldest continuing residents. They rode in the parade in a carriage decorated with flowers, waving to crowds that included their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It felt surreal to be celebrated simply for surviving, but also touching to be recognized as part of the town's living history. That evening, there was a dance in the town square, and despite their advanced age and creaking joints, Austin led Adelaide onto the dance floor for a slow waltz. Remember the last time we danced? He asked as they swayed together. Our wedding reception, Adelaide said immediately. You stepped on my toes twice? I was nervous. Austin smiled down at her. I could not believe you had actually married me. Best decision I ever made, Adelaide said seriously. You saved my life and then made it worth living. We saved each other, Austin corrected. I was drifting before I found you, Adelaide. You gave me purpose beyond the ranch, reminded me that life was about more than just work. They danced until their bodies protested too much to continue, and then sat at a table surrounded by their family, watching the younger generations dance and laugh and live. This was their legacy, Adelaide thought. Not just the ranch or the store, but these people, these lives they had helped create and nurture. In 1932, Austin's health began to decline noticeably. He tired easily, sometimes seemed confused about what day it was, forgot conversations they had just had. The doctor said it was simply old age, that his body was wearing out after 79 years of hard use. There was nothing to be done but make him comfortable and treasure whatever time remained. Adelaide cared for him with the same fierce devotion he had shown her 54 years ago by that well. She managed his medications, helped him dress when his fingers would not work properly, read to him when his eyes grew too weak for reading himself. Alex wanted to move them to the main house where there would be more help, but Austin insisted on staying in their cabin. This is our home, he said stubbornly. I want to die in our home. So they stayed, and Alex made sure someone checked on them daily, and Adelaide refused to think about what life would be like when Austin was gone. In the spring of 1933, Austin took a turn for the worse. He was bedridden now, his body failing even as his mind remained mostly clear. Adelaide sat beside his bed, hour after hour, holding his hand, talking about their life together. No regrets, Austin whispered one evening in May. Not one single regret. Me neither, Adelaide said through tears. You gave me a beautiful life, Austin Lawson. We gave each other beautiful lives, he corrected weakly. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for drawing water from that well. Adelaide kissed his forehead gently. Thank you for saving me. Austin smiled, his eyes drifting closed. Best day of my life finding you there. Like God put you in my path for a reason. He did, Adelaide agreed. We were meant for each other. Austin Lawson died 3 days later, on May 14th, 1933, at the age of 79, surrounded by his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. His passing was peaceful, a quiet slipping away in the afternoon light, and Adelaide held his hand until the very end. The funeral was held at the ranch, and it seemed like half of Nevada attended. Austin had been well loved and respected, a pillar of the community for more than 50 years. They buried him on the property he had loved, near where his father and brother rested, under a headstone that read, Austin Matthew Lawson, 1854-1933, beloved husband, father, and friend. Adelaide grieved deeply but not destructively. She was 76 years old and had been granted 53 years with the man she loved, which was more than many people ever got. She mourned what she had lost, but celebrated what she had been given, and slowly found a way to live with the absence. She moved into town permanently after Austin's death, taking a room above the mercantile that Alex and Aaron had converted into an apartment. She could no longer manage the store physically, but she kept the books and advised her grandson, who now ran the day-to-day operations. It gave her purpose and kept her connected to the community. In 1935, Adelaide attended Amelia's oldest daughter's wedding, watching her granddaughter marry with the same joy and hope that Adelaide had felt at her own wedding 56 years ago. The circle continuing, love perpetuating through generations. In the evenings, Adelaide would sit in her room and read through the history she and Austin had written together, remembering. She added entries occasionally, recording Austin's death and the family events that followed, determined to continue the record they had started. On August 15th, 1936, Adelaide woke feeling strange, disconnected from her body in a way that seemed both frightening and oddly peaceful. She was 79 years old, the same age Austin had been when he died, and she found symmetry in that. She spent the day setting her affairs in order, writing letters to her children and grandchildren, making sure the history she had written was somewhere safe where it would be found. When Alex came by that evening to check on her, she hugged him tightly and told him how proud she was of the man he had become. "Are you feeling all right, Mother?" Alex asked, concerned by her unusual sentimentality. "I am feeling just fine," Adelaide assured him. "I just wanted to make sure you knew how much I love you. All of you. You have been the greatest blessing of my life besides your father." Alex hugged her back, promising to visit again tomorrow, and Adelaide smiled because she knew there would not be a tomorrow. She could feel it in her bones, the same way she had felt the approaching storm all those years ago when she had first come to Nevada. That night, Adelaide went to bed in her small room above the Mercantile in Silver Peak. She thought about Austin and their life together, about the moment he had drawn water from the well and pressed a cup to her lips and saved her life. She thought about their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all the love that had come from that one moment of grace in the desert. She thought about the old well still standing on the Lazy L property, a monument to where their story began. She hoped someone would remember to maintain it, to let it stand as a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. Adelaide Barrett Lawson died peacefully in her sleep on August 16th, 1936, exactly 58 years. And one day, after Austin Lawson had found her collapsed by the well and gave her water and changed the course of both their lives, they buried her beside Austin on the ranch, under a matching headstone, and the whole town mourned the passing of a remarkable woman who had been part of Silver Peak's fabric for nearly 60 years. At the funeral, Alex read from the history his mother had written, sharing the story of how his parents met and fell in love. He read about the well and the water and the cowboy who stopped to help a stranger in distress. He read about courtship and marriage and building a life together, despite all the hardships the West could throw at them. They saved each other, Alex concluded, his voice thick with emotion. And in saving each other, they built something that will last for generations. We are all here because a cowboy drew water from a well and gave it to a woman who needed it. We are all here because they chose love over fear, again and again, for 53 years. That is their legacy. That is what they left us. The mourners dispersed eventually, returning to their own lives, but the family remained. Alex and his siblings, Adelaide and Austin's grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all gathered at the graves of the couple who had started it all. The old well still stood on the western edge of the property, and that evening several family members walked out to see it. The stones were weathered now, crumbling in places, but the structure remained sound. Someone had placed fresh flowers beside it, though no one knew who. "We should restore it," Alex said, running his hand over the rough stone. "Make sure it lasts. This place is important." And they did. Over the following months, the family carefully repaired and reinforced the old well, making sure it would stand for another century. They placed a plaque beside it that told the story of Adelaide and Austin, of the day they met and the life they built. The Lazy L continued under family management, passing from Alex to his children and eventually to his grandchildren. The Mercantile remained in operation, managed by various family members over the decades. A fixture of Silver Peak's main street, both businesses bore the marks of Adelaide and Austin's influence, run with the same integrity and care they had demonstrated throughout their lives. And on the western edge of the Lazy L Ranch property, the old stone well stood as a monument to that August day in 1878 when a woman collapsed without strength and a cowboy drew water and made her drink. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness echo through generations, that love found in desperate circumstances can be the strongest foundation, and that happy endings are real if you are brave enough to choose them. The well stood, and the family flourished, and the story of Adelaide and Austin became the founding legend of the Lawson family, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story of survival and love, of chance and choice, of a woman who nearly died in the desert and a man who saved her life and then spent the next 53 years making sure that life was worth living. It was a story that started with water and thirst and ended with love and legacy, and it proved that sometimes the best stories begin at the moment when all seems lost, when strength fails and hope flickers, because those are the moments when grace arrives wearing a dusty cowboy hat and carrying a cup of well water that tastes like salvation. The desert remembered them, the well remembered them, and most importantly, their family remembered them. Adelaide Barrett and Austin Lawson, who met beside a well in the summer of 1878 and built a love that lasted until death and beyond, carried forward in the lives and hearts of everyone they touched. Their story was complete, beginning to end, with all the threads tied and all the questions answered. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would continue long after the last person who remembered them personally had also passed beyond. They had, in every way that mattered, succeeded in building something eternal from that single moment when water flowed from a well and hope was reborn in a desperate heart. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.